Are you ready for Q&A? All right. You said I'm the guy, okay? So I'm wide open here. This has nothing to do with what you said, but it's still really a good question. Do you think many Jewish residents in Paris will immigrate to Israel in view of what's happening there?
All right, let me relate it to what I was talking about. France has coddled. France has had neighborhoods, these no-go neighborhoods, that have fostered terrorism. And so for Jewish people, they went to a supermarket and they got killed. They got murdered. And so I don't know, if I were a Jewish person in France with my children, I think I'd be leaving. All right. So, but France has sort of done this. You know, the French are not necessarily my favorite people anyway. I mean, although I eat French fries just about every day. You know, But France has had a long record of not being very good to Jewish people, and so now I think it's a little bit too late now. And yes, I think a lot of them will emigrate.
Okay, we've got some other scholars that might, if you have a definitive answer to this and want to throw up your hand, throw up your hand. But here's the question. Are there any textual indications that the second half of Daniel, or maybe Daniel 11 is what they mean, is younger than earlier parts of Daniel by words, letter formations, syntax, other things like that?
I'm not so sure about that. I mean, the second half of Daniel does change. It changes from stories about Daniel to revelations that came through a figure of Daniel. People have tried to make this case that some of the chapters go back and forth between Hebrew and Aramaic. And some people have tried to find that they haven't really made the case. So linguistically, I would say we're not there yet.
Any Hebrew scholars want to? All right. Okay. Lawson Younger teaches Hebrew Trinity Evangelical Divinity School.
Well, I'll speak more on the Aramaic and the linguistic side of it. We're seeing far more and more and more of the Aramaic in Daniel showing earlier and earlier precedence in the Neo-Assyrian Empire. So the whole definition of Imperial Aramaic is now being reassessed, and I think in the next decade we'll have a very different view of some of that. So I would concur with what you're saying.
If those of you who don't know, Lawson Younger is one of the world's preeminent scholars of Assyrian understanding. He reads cuneiform for bedtime. which is kind of like looking at pictures in my book, but that's okay. He reads picture books. Wouldn't Porphyry's critique of Daniel have offended Jewish scholars of the time? Were there Jewish scholars of that time who offered their own defense of Daniel, or did they decide not to get in the middle of that fight?
Yes, but it was really more between Christians, because that was where the attack was. The attack was on Christianity. And so we have, certainly the Jewish people believed, as Jerome did, and as traditional Christians do, that all of Daniel was from the 6th century Babylonian Daniel.
Okay, remember we're by and large a congregation of the ethnos, okay? So how's the Song of Solomon used and interpreted in the Jewish faith?
Okay, I mean, I can answer that. I don't know what it has to do with anything, but
you got to understand, some people never get to ask a question of a Jewish rabbi.
Okay. In Talmudic, in rabbinic circles, there was an argument: do we let the Song of Songs come into the Bible or not? And some people said it's a bunch of saloon songs. It's a bunch of I'm serious. And by the way, if you read the book a certain way, as you're laughing, you can read it that way. It's love songs. It's describing a woman's body. There's all sorts of things. And Rabbi Akiva came along, and he said, no, this is a metaphor about God and Israel. And that's the love that's going on. So you put it in the book, and they did.
Now, again, a question from what version of the Bible do you use?
I use the Masoretic text.
Okay, for those who are wondering, the Masoretic text is pretty old. The Masoretic scholars were the ones who were transcribing the old, what we would call the Old Testament, from the at least a couple of hundred A.D. up through at least 1,000 or so, 1,100 A.D.
Right. The school of Tiberius was mostly like later, like 900, 1,000.
Yeah, the oldest Hebrew Old Testament we had before the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls was a Masoretic text from 950 or 1,000 current era. All right, Rabbi Scolnic, you mentioned resurrection, specifically that of Daniel 12:2. Do you believe in resurrection of the dead?
Yes. Can I tell you that there were Jewish people in rabbinic times, there were women who were buried with their makeup and their pots and pans. I'm not making this up. Right? Because, after I've been in the ground for 700 years, I really don't look very good. I need my makeup. I want my favorite pots and pans, and that's how much they believed in resurrection.
Fantastic. Is your reason for believing in a second Daniel in 165 BCE primarily the uncharacteristic detail of the first half of Daniel 11?
Yes. That detail, it's so specific, and, I've been studying Daniel 11 verse by verse, spending about 3 months on every verse. And the more I've gotten into it, I am amazed at how, it had to be someone who was living in that time, and very specific. And the closer it gets to 165, the bigger the detail comes. The chapter explodes with exposition. So yes, that's what I believe. But let me say something else. I think that sometimes we believers give secularists ammunition. I think that sometimes, we sort of defeat our own purposes. So in other words, I would rather happily state and by the way, Jerome understood it. Jerome understood that Porphyry, was right about all of those things. He just disagreed about when it was said. But he understood that all of that stuff was exact.
If we pick and choose among the truth of Scripture, don't we risk destroying it all?
I'm not picking and choosing about the truth of Scripture. I'm not picking and choosing about the truth of Scripture at all. I don't quite understand and I'm not saying this defensively. I don't understand the question. I'm just talking about when this chapter was written. That has nothing to do with the truth of Scripture. I believe that every word comes from God.
Does your theory cause problems for the first 4 chapters of Daniel?
I haven't studied them yet. And at this rate, at a verse every 3 months, it's not going well.
That's what you get for starting at the end.
But by the way, what I would say is, my guess is, I believe, and I want to believe, that those chapters did come from the 6th century. And that is my assumption until I might see something different, but I don't think I will.
So when you take home from this yourself, how does it affect your life?
It affects my life in the way I was talking about at the end. I don't think we understand what's going on in this world. And, I don't know how everybody here feels about it, but I really meant every word I said. That I think that we've got a big problem, and I think our leaders have not been serving us well. By the way, I come from Connecticut, but I vote like Texas.
You can take the boy out of Texas. You can't take Texas out of the boy.
No, I really, this could not be more serious to me. What I see in the book of Daniel is what I see in this world. And what I see in this world is what I see in the book of Daniel. So that's why I'm talking about not quibbling. We're talking about such major things. We're talking about the future of the world, and I think it's on the brink. I'm not an alarmist. I'm not a warmonger. I'm none of those things. I'm just scared. And we have to fight back, and we're not fighting back.
Thank you.
Wait, can I tell one more story?
All you want.
Okay, one more story. They were gonna build the channel. You know what the channel is underneath the English Channel? A tunnel underneath it. And so they put out for bids. And from France, they get a bid for 100 million francs, and from England for, they still have pounds, £1 billion. And from Brooklyn, New York, from the firm of Shapiro and Shapiro, right? They get a bid for $28.67. So this commission says, look, we have to do right by everybody, or by the taxpayers and everybody else. Let's take a field trip to Brooklyn. So they go to the address on the proposal, and they go to 35 Ocean Parkway, and they climb up 3 flights of steps, and they get to the firm of Shapiro and Shapiro. And they open the door, and there are 2 old Jewish men, and they said, is this Shapiro and Shapiro? And one says, I'm Shapiro, and he's Shapiro. They said, look, we have a bid here for $28.67. How could this be? We have 100 billion francs and 100 million pounds. How can you do it? He says, what's the problem? He says, Shapiro here will stand in England with a shovel. And I, Shapiro, will stand in France with a shovel. And we'll start digging. So they think about it for a minute, and they say, but what if you don't meet in the middle? He says, so you'll have 2 tunnels.
Thank you
Now,
very
wait a
much.
minute. I got to explain. In case you don't get the point of the joke. I don't know if we can meet in the middle, but if not, we'll have 2 ways to God.